Priscilla Gets Historical. It was a Saturday morning in June 2009, and I was going to spend all day on a bus travelling around Brisbane, exploring Brisbane's rainbow past. It was not the first time I'd done it. 10 years before, I'd helped lead a small bunch of mostly young queer students from University of Queensland on a Brisbane Beats and History tour. It was a much smaller operation using the Student Union minibus, and my partner in crime for that tour was David Free, who was doing an honours thesis on beats and public space at the time. This wasn't going to be a minibus. Instead, we'd hired a proper coach and were expecting around 50 people. My partner in crime in this venture was Gay Lemon. Gay and I had worked together years ago on Queer Radio, and it was good to team up again. The Priscilla tour kicked off in the Valley, and we started by walking down Brunswick Street and the Mall and pointing out the history of queer venues past and present. We signalled each stop by holding up a rainbow umbrella. Preeminent among the venues was the old Hacienda, now the Valley Hotel. Back in the 70s, the downstairs bar was known as the Siesta Bar and then became Zulu's, and the hotel pretty much became queer space in the 80s, even hosting a Queen's Ball. That all changed in 87 when it was turned into an Irish pub and the queers were kicked out. Down the other end of Brunswick Street was the old Terminus, which had had a number of incarnations starting in 1974 as Sweeney's. Later in the 70s it became the Silver Dollar, and then for a while wasn't queer at all but became a punk place. But in the 80s it was renamed the Terminus and became one of the main queer venues until the early 90s. Its last manifestation as a queer venue was in 1996 when it was opened up for a short time as Hazel's, and I remember going there for drinks after a kiss-in at the casino in that year. The walking tour ended up outside of 4ZZZ where we met up with the bus. At ZZZ, Gay and I recounted some of the history of Brisbane's queer broadcasting there, everything from gay waves through to dyke mics and queer radio. And we also spoke about how important ZZZ had been back in the dark days of the Bjelke Peterson era. Once on the bus, we were off on the road and we headed around Petrie Bight, pointing out where places had been, and then over the Story Bridge to Kangaroo Point. Kangaroo Point has a number of historical sites. The Story Bridge Hotel itself had a queer venue for a while back in the 70s, but our main stop was St Mary's Anglican Church up on the cliffs. As well as being quite an historic old building and a spectacular site, St Mary's also had a rather amazing stained glass window given by Lillian Cooper and her companion secretary, Josephine Bedford. The window is of the centurion from the Gospel story in Luke. The window was installed back in the 40s and 50s, but from the 70s onwards, a number of scholars had started giving the narrative a queer twist. Had they come up with it themselves, or were they building on an older reading abroad in queer communities for a very long time before? Amazingly, on that very day, the Gospel was set as a reading in the 3-yearly lectionary shared by Anglican, Catholic and Uniting Churches. It was as if Josephine and Lillian had blessed the tour. The tour headed off then around various spots around the south side. The most important was Dyke Bridge in Boundary Street, West End. Back in the 90s, this bridge was used as a major graffiti spot by many West End dykes. I used to live in West End then and always looked forward to what new piece of graffiti might be there. After lunch at the Hare Krishna Cafe, we headed for a drive around the city. Not much is left of the old queer sites there, so it was more a matter of driving around a few blocks before heading off out through the western suburbs to UQ. Not many people realise there's a rich queer history at UQ, including the very origins of the place. There's been an organised queer student presence at UQ since 1973, when Campus Camp was established. It's been very much an activist presence too, and so we gave everyone an experience of what it was like to be in a die-in. From UQ we went over to Twong Cemetery to visit the grave of Lillian Cooper and Josephine Bedford, who were buried there together. We spoke more about the couple and also gave an insight into the biblical texts on the gravestone. There's actually a rich history in UQ and Europe of male and female friendship pairs being buried together, so that, come the resurrection on the last day, the first sight they would see is each other. From Twong Cemetery it was off on the last lap to Spring Hill and then to Sporty's Hotel to relax and unwind over drinks.